Hello and welcome to swissnex India webinar series. This is our fourth webinar in the series that is called Making Swiss Startups India Ready. Today we are going to see and learn how do Swiss startups leverage the India advantage for their Medtech startup. We have two experts with us from InExcel. InExcel is building and growing the Medtech ecosystem for startups in India and across the world. I will hand it on to our first speaker. First, let's look at the agenda for today. After I've introduced the concept of the webinar, we will have insights from our first speaker, Mr. A. Vijayarajan, and then we'll hear from our second expert, Dr. Jagdish Chaturvedi, followed by a series of question and answers directly from the audience. Let me just mention that the tool that you're using right now, the GoToWebinar tool, has a very small panel, and in that you will find something that says questions. You could drop that down and keep typing your questions to us that we will collect. And this webinar is meant for you, a Swiss startup in medical technology who's looking at India either as a market or as an intellectual collaborator. If you have any questions that you would like to get answered today by our expert speakers, please don't hesitate in typing them on the questions panel in your GoToWebinar tool. Moving on, let's hear from our first speaker today, Mr. A. Vijayarajan.
Hello, good afternoon everybody. My name is Vijayarajan. I have roughly about 36 years of experience in the industry. I'm a postgraduate in computer science and also an MBA from Marquette University, USA. The first portion of my career I've spent in information technology.
Sorry, I think we'll have to be a little bit louder for the...
Okay,
yeah, this one.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay. You can't get a
feedback. No.
Feedback? No, can you just find out whether they are listening to this hearing?
If it's not audible to you, please let us know at any time. Let me ask Eva. Eva, can you hear me? If you could just type in during... whenever we speak, if you're not audible, just type in a question and say, ask us to be a little louder, please. Please carry on.
Okay. So, I was mentioning about the early part of my career. I used to work for information technology. Later, I moved to General Electric GE Medical Systems, and I spent 10 years there. And subsequently, I ran a consulting company in consulting in healthcare and medtech spaces. I have consulted in hospitals. I have consulted with startup companies. One of the companies was making a robotic device for the oncology applications. So that's what my background, and I'll sort of take you through. They are seeing the slide.
Yes.
Okay. So I will take you through some of these points broadly, and I will use some additional slides to show you, but to a large extent actually I will leave it to my colleague to talk more relevant information, because most of the things what I am going to be telling probably you can get it from any reports, okay, other than few insights here and there, but what you will hear from my colleagues is a lot more relevant. Okay, so let me just switch over to the other slide set. Okay, just that. If you see this slide, the way in which we are moving from 2013 to 2050, we'll have a lot more older people. The older the people, there's more healthcare requirements. The second area is actually by and large, economy is improving. We may not be as wealthier as most of the developed countries, but in the last 10 years, our economy has really boomed, and we have created a lot more wealthy people. And when there is more wealth, people look for more healthcare. They are likely to spend more on healthcare. So that's another area of improvement. Then the other if you look at the disease pattern in India is changing substantially. If you look at from the 20 years period between 1990 to 2010, we are moving away from traditional communicable diseases to non-communicable diseases. The patterns are changing. And some of these non-communicable diseases are chronic diseases, which means it is not a transaction-based healthcare delivery, it is an ongoing healthcare delivery. So more people can get into diabetics or heart diseases, they need intervention more frequently than a typical communicable diseases. So that also pushes more healthcare spend. Other area is, even though we are not so much in insurance, and okay, this is a different way of looking at the disease, how it really affects our economy. The number of years lost due to ill health, which is disability and early death. Here also you can see that a lot more changes are happening because of the non-communicable diseases. Okay. Another dimension is there is a lot of effort both by government and the private sectors in creating the infrastructure. Our infrastructure currently is pretty weak. Okay, so if you look at the next slide, vis-a-vis the world average, both in terms of the number of beds, that's one of the indicators, and the number of physicians and number of nurses per thousand, we are far below than the world average and much below than the developed country. The unfortunate thing is that the market is growing in such disproportionately, what we call as an uneven distribution. Okay, something like 70% of our population live in what we call the tier 2, tier 3 cities. But that accounts only for about 48% or 47% of our infrastructure. The large population live there, but with a less amount of infrastructure. So that's that's a problem. So it's growing, but they're growing unevenly. This another area is we are a self-pay market. The insurance penetration is roughly about 20%. So unlike in some other developed countries where insurance is high or government pays for it, so we are more of a self-pay market. So how do we really manage this? If you look at in the last 10-15 years, we seem to have done good in pharma and in healthcare delivery. So we are a market where generic pharma drugs are developed and used internally and also exported. In healthcare delivery, we have a lot of innovation. We can deliver healthcare cost effectively. We seem to have understood the process, and a lot of innovation has come. But that innovation has not come in the medical devices yet. Okay. So I'm just giving you various points. I'm not just giving you very chronologically. I'm just giving you various points. At the end, I sort of summarize what we are trying to do. But look at this is a very important slide. Okay. So between 2012 and 2025, the Medtech spend, MT is a Medtech. Medtech spend in America, it's going to be $225 billion. And in BRIC countries, it will be $156 billion. And India is going to be $42 billion. But the next data is more important. Where does this spend really come from? And if you convert into per capita, okay, we are talking about per capita in India is about $30 versus in US market is about $643. So you see $42 billion or from the other developing countries like a BRIC $156 billion, they are spent by large number of people, but per person the spend is very less. So this shows in a very important information what this market can afford per person. We can't afford that $643 per person. We can afford only $30+ per person. So affordable medtech is the most important thing. So when you start from, we have a huge market. The market is growing for various reasons, like the drivers we saw. But this market continues to be good market for affordable healthcare. It is not meant for the high end of the equipments. So this is a place I sort of summarized before I take it to my colleague. Okay, so we are saying this is a largely self-pay market and a high price sensitivity because of again affordability, large volume of transactions, low per capita spend, and large public health system, okay, being there, but lack of skilled professionals and inadequate infrastructure. So these are the about 5-6 points. It adds into a situation which is not seen elsewhere. Okay. So what we are saying is, if you really read that, close to 50% of the babies in India are born at home today, necessitating new products for neonatal care until they can get to a hospital. See, this situation does not arise in a developed country where close to 100% of the delivery happens in a care setting. Okay, so that's a fundamental. So this is the type of situations we have in India. When you look at unskilled people, so even if you have high-end equipment, we don't know how to really operate. We don't have enough people to operate. That's one of the reasons that these products do not go to our rural settings. Okay. Then the other comes in terms of affordability. Even if it is available, even there are skilled people available to operate, I can't afford because they are expensive. So I need a cheaper solution. So in summary, what we are saying is we have 3 problems. We have availability. Technology is not available. And then we have accessibility. Technology is available, but I can't access. The next one is it's available, I can access, but I can't afford. So I'll just give you 2 examples to the first one is a transport mechanism. We call this an auto rickshaw. Okay, it's a very, very affordable. You don't see that in the developed countries. Okay, and it takes probably 1 to 2 people, maybe sometimes 3 people. And road conditions, okay, it's not meant for BMWs, so it's meant for these type of things. So you need to really identify the right type of product. The other product is a diagnostic portable ultrasound, with which I have personally worked about 20 years back as a part of GE Medical Systems. So it is a product made for India and in India. Of course, we got help from design technology from GE in Japan. So some of this actually made us affordable for the rest of the population. So I'm just taking to another dimension. If you really look at the social media, the penetration is really becoming huge in countries like India, and probably there are opportunities one need to really find out. We can't articulate, we have problems, we just see a technology, and there's a penetration is happening. Whether somebody can really marry these two and provide a provide a solution which can meet to some of our problems. Okay, so I just give you some data in terms of how the digital health can make a change in the country. And another area is, especially in a self-pay market, owning the disease by a medical technology vendor will be a great value proposition. So there are specific diseases which once you sets on, and then you need to really support the person through the life. So if there could be a company which has got a solution for throughout, right from prevention, diagnosis, and treatment and management. So that could be another area. So these two areas actually, we don't have examples, but we feel that probably somebody can come with the innovative ideas of marrying this concept of owning the disease, or marrying the technology of social media and internet to the healthcare. They can really solve the problem. So this is a broad overview. I think we'll spend more time during the question and answer to answer specific questions. Currently, I leave it to my colleague to talk about on the affordable medtech. Okay, over to Jagdish.
Thanks. I think Mr. A. Vijayarajan has completely laid the platform for me to talk to you. I'm an ENT surgeon by training and a medical device innovator as a result of evolution. I don't have 36 years of experience, but I do have 4 years of experience in medical devices with a lot of learnings which I have learned the hard way. And that probably sends a message that medtech ecosystem in India is young. It is young and it's learning, it is maturing, but as of now, it is nascent and requires the ecosystem to build. And that's mainly the reason of sharing my experiences is because the way medtech innovation works in India is significantly different from the way medtech innovation works in much more mature markets like in the West, in the US or in European countries. And I'm here mainly to discuss those things. A few things about my background is I started off to be an ENT surgeon and stumbled upon an unmet need during my training. I trained at one of the leading medical colleges in Bangalore called St. John's Medical College, and stumbled upon a clinical problem and tried to solve it, and went overboard because of the guidance given by my seniors and peers, and started to develop a medical device and made a startup company, and eventually developed it till it led to its exit with one of the companies in India, and then went on to learn the process formally through a program called Stanford India Biodesign that is funded by the Government of India's Department of Biotechnology, which sent me with a product engineer, a designer, and a PhD graduate to learn the process of medical device innovations in the US at Stanford University. And having learned that, came back to India at All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi with IIT Delhi as a collaborator, and implemented the process, and then started to invent medical devices following a formal process so that we can tackle these challenges that are very specific to our Indian subcontinent. And that has led to 13 innovations and counting as of now, with 5 successful exits to both large and small Indian medtech companies, formation of 3 startup companies, and 1 research project. And the rest that I'm not talking about are obviously failures, which are going to lead to a lot of learnings from these talks. So the first thing that I would like to bring to you is the way Western technology is invented. It's invented with a mindset that's very different, with a system that's very different. And when such a technology is brought to India, it struggles to find its place, and it struggles to be used in a way that can address the need. So it's best understood with an example. So if you look at the bottom left of your screen, there's an image. It's a diagrammatic image of a balloon being inserted into the womb of a mother. So there's a condition called postpartum hemorrhage, which is essentially bleeding that happens from mothers who've just delivered their babies, and that can lead to very fatal consequences. And this, unfortunately, is one of the biggest causes of maternal mortality in our country. If you look at this invention, which was made in the US, is a simple balloon that, if inserted by a skilled individual, placed inside the womb of the mother, if inflated, causes the bleeding to stop by applying direct pressure. Now, I would say that's it's a fantastic innovation, and it's a much needed solution in our country. But we don't see this invention in any, or at least most hospitals in our country, especially in the rural parts of our country where this need is the highest, because mothers deliver at homes most of the times, and even if they are delivering in institutions, they are anemic, they are malnourished, and even small amount of bleeding can lead to fatal consequences. And management of postpartum hemorrhage is done at larger centers, and transferring the mother from one place to the other takes a long time. And this solution doesn't really fit into the system, A, because it costs over $250 whereas most of the patients who are below poverty line can afford only something which is about a couple of dollars. And the other thing is it requires a certain amount of skill and expertise, and it is made or created to be used by skilled gynecologists and not by primary care workers or healthcare workers. And in India, most of the clinicians who face this problem actually take a condom and a Foley's catheter, tie them together, and then inflate it using normal saline and try and stop the bleeding. Which tells a lot, which tells that we need the same principle solution in our country because doctors are making it. But we want something that is affordable, that can be used by someone as simple as just a graduate MBBS or medical doctor, or maybe even a nurse or a paramedic staff, and which is available easily at primary healthcare centers or community healthcare centers and essentially used during transportation. Whereas this technology was created with the mindset of, a gynecologist would use it as a second line treatment in a large hospital because that's the WHO recommendation of its use. And so this is a great example of a simple technology. It's not electronics or something that is extremely not thought or not possible to create. It's a simple mechanical solution, but even that does not fit into our system if it doesn't take into account our affordability, who's going to use it, in what situation they're going to use it, and how it's going to be implemented. If you look at the next image that's in the middle, it talks about an Indian technology that is developed to identify veins in the hands in people who have lost a lot of blood, and then the nurses need to access the IV line, the intravenous line, to provide fluids or blood. Many times when people lose large amount of blood, these veins are not easily found because they collapse, and it's very important to get fluids into the body at that point of time. And this is a brilliant solution that uses some sort of light-based technology, which I'm assuming is infrared, that maps and shows you the position of these veins so that you can access it. But if you look at most large hospitals which face a huge burden of these kind of cases, don't have such a solution. And when we try to dwell deeper and find out why, it's because this is like a physical device that needs to be bought by someone. Hospitals usually do not want to buy something like this because they have nurses, and they say that we have extremely skilled nurses and they should be able to find the veins. A doctor is not going to buy this. A nurse is also not going to personally buy this. The patient is not going to be in a situation to make that buying decision. And the patient's relatives are also not going to buy it and use it. This is something that an institution needs to take in. But it really doesn't fit into who the buyer is and how is it going to be used in our existing system. But if we can modify the same technology and look at nursing homes or smaller hospitals where nursing capabilities are not very high, then this kind of a solution could be used there, but it's too expensive. It's I think some of them range $4,000 to $5,000, and some of them are cheaper but lack quality. So again, if there was a solution or technology that could have been invented in a way that it could just be incorporated with something that hospitals already take in, or if this could be incorporated in something that nurses already use, or if this could be incorporated in a way that nursing homes could afford it, then this can really save lives of a lot of people. And it is these factors that need to be taken when inventing a solution in India. If you look at the last image in the bottom right, is a small device that was invented by me, but we followed the process that was taught to us on how to identify a problem and then invent it versus creating a technology and trying to force fit it. So we actually spent some time in the hospitals for a couple of months just observing patients, and then we saw a 5-year-old child who had stuffed a small button up his nasal cavity and doctors really struggled to take it out. They took a needle, they bent it, tried to take it out, caused bleeding, and the child actually had to undergo surgery to remove it. And what we've created over here is a very small handheld device that a non-skilled person like a non-ENT doctor could use, to remove foreign bodies that are impacted in the nasal cavities of children. And this has taken into account the skill that is required, the cost that is required, the amount of things that the doctor needs to know while removing the procedure, such as the illumination or the angle at which it needs to be inserted so that a successful removal could be done. And even yet, after making it so easy, when we do our field validation, clinicians say that this looks like it's too easy to remove a foreign body from the nose, and patients are not going to pay more for something that looks so easy. So we are still surprised every time that we try and understand stakeholders in our country, and we need to keep mitigating it. Now we are reiterating the design, reiterating the device till it completely fits into a system so that it is accepted. So my overall message here is that if you're a startup company and you're looking at an opportunity in India or developing countries, I think it's not going to be easy inventing there and just implementing it over here. I think what's really the challenge is to understand all these obstacles that prevail, which are very specific to our country, especially stakeholders, doctors, nurses, patients, and all the people who are involved in the purchase and buying of the device. It's very important to understand how they play with such a solution. Very important to understand the market segment, whether this is a rural, public, or both, or corporate. It's very important to understand where the need is and whether the stakeholders and the business models really fit and align. It's not just identifying a problem and saying, yeah, now I know what to invent, and you invent it and it's just going to do it on its own. That's really not how it's going to work. Just finding the problem through a process is just a part of the whole journey. The rest of it is fitting it with stakeholders, business models, and adapting it to our challenges. So in this short period of time, I think that's the message that I could give. But thank you for this opportunity, and we're open to any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jagdish. Thank you, Mr. Vijay. I am just going to go back to the previous slide and bring out 3 keywords. Mr. Vijay Rajan spoke about number of opportunities that could be lucrative for Swiss Medtech startups. But what I'm going to ask you before we invite questions is, you pointed out 3 key words: the challenges that exist in the medtech industry in India is availability, accessibility, and affordability. So this webinar is obviously meant for Swiss startups that are looking at India as an intellectual collaborator, or as a market where they could eventually bring in something or develop something here from scratch and sell it to Indians. So could you throw some light on the process? And then, this question is open to both of you. The process that, for example, a Swiss medtech startup that is utilizing social media and marrying it up with medical technology. It could be the data of the patients that the doctor accesses, or it could be the appointments and the patient history that the nurse or the assistant accesses. If we could just talk a little bit about these factors and marrying it up with the 3 keywords that you pointed out.
Yeah, first actually let me just to focus on this 3 keywords: availability, accessibility, and affordability. The only suggestion both of us are saying is that please spend time in the Indian healthcare environment, how the delivery is done, who are the stakeholders, and what a person can afford, and what type of diseases are being treated, and how are they currently treated. And then that will give you a clear idea of what are the gaps. Then I'm sure Swiss has got a lot of technologies, and then look at some of those technologies and see whether you can use those technologies to solve these problems. So the front end of your venture should be spent in India, not by reading reports, not by having calls with the people. You must immerse yourself. Okay, Unless you do that, it's very, very difficult to understand some of the difficulties what this space is having it and what type of solutions the people are looking for. Okay, I'll just give you an example. There's one of the companies did that few years back. So they used to sell CT and MRI machines. Okay, so they will complete the sales, but they will not be in a position to do the installation, because you go and find that the site is not ready. You go and find why site is not ready. There is one doctor, he started building his own hospital and he doesn't have that expertise. So this company said that, okay, now onwards we'll also provide civil construction consultancy. So they will accelerate your site preparation. The other thing what happened was, a lot of people don't know how to really manage their money. So this company even started giving loans vis-a-vis what they can get from the banks. So you need to think differently. I'm just telling examples from outside the medical technology. This is a big company. They can afford to do some of these things. For a smaller company, just go and find out, look at the examples what Dr. Jagdish gave. Okay, so a lot of opportunities are available there. Interesting things for people coming from Swiss is you have a lot of intellectual property available. It's a question of how do you marry that into for the real problem what we have. So don't come with a solution, come with your IP, but look at the gaps what we have and how you can manage that. Then once you do the front end work, go back, do your development. I think you have a lot more infrastructure there. And then again come back for your field study, take the feedback and then iterate it and then deliver it. That will be the only way. I can't list down these are the things that are the problem, but you can look at the disease pattern in India and that will give you some idea where do you need to be working on it. Now the next question is about social media. See, here is a challenge. As I said that very clearly that somebody has to come and understand and marry that. Okay, a lot of people are trying. One basic problem what we have is communication technology or a telecom and adaptation of telecom, it's all improving. But finally, what we need is, we need content. Okay, the content should be in digital. So if I make a measurements and that measurement needs to be in digital, then only I can use my social media. Otherwise, I can just do only counseling. I can't do anything beyond that. But unfortunately, we are still in the evolution stage of converting our healthcare data in the digital form. And most of our hospitals, even in corporate hospitals in the tier 1 cities, continue to have paper-based records. And then if you go to tier 2, tier 3 cities, it's completely paper and it is not really managed properly. So one had to start from how do I capture data in digital form? Okay, then only it can be used. But I see the major benefit can happen only on chronic diseases, not for any other intervention. Chronic diseases require constant monitoring and analyzing the data and doing the right intervention. Okay, so every intervention need not be done by healthcare people. It could be a suggestive. For example, in diabetics, you can say that change your medicine to this dosage to that dosage. So somebody has to be keeping track of that and then say that, okay, this is what's happening. Or you have not entered your sugar level for the past 3 days. Please do that. So, but one has to, I'm just giving you some trivial examples, but one has to spend a lot of time. I don't think I have an answer. In fact, if I had the answer, I would have started my own company. Okay. So, but we see that every other industry, they've gone in two ways. One, like what Jagdish said, that go and find out the gaps and then fill the gap with the technology. Some people went there, okay, I have this technology, how can I make it available? Or this technology was used in manufacturing, can I use it somewhere else? It is used in banking, can I use it in retail? So people have done that. So probably people coming from the developed countries, you must have used this technology in a different area. You come and see here, oh, why are they doing this? Why can't they use this technology? Those things will come to your mind. if you come and see it. But I still feel there's a huge opportunity in doing integrating that.
Great. Thank you once again for answering my question. Just before inviting questions from the audience, I would like to throw another question at Dr. Jagdish. So, from all what I hear, the key takeaway about the Indian medtech scenario is that right now is the right time for Swiss startups to come to India.
Yeah.
I'm adding both of your inputs. So, the right way would be to come to India and participate in shaping the Indian medtech ecosystem, because you've already experienced, as a Swiss startup, you've already experienced, you've already built a product or a service that is either working or a working prototype, and that is why people around you are supporting you. And right now would be the right time to look at international markets like India, which are nascent, which are growing. So this could be the opportunity to shape it. Would you like to throw some more light on the steps for, take a very simple example of a medtech Swiss startup that would like to, that already has envisioned a prototype and would like to go ahead and look at the unmet needs and
So there's a startup that has a product or a early prototype that's ready. I think the first thing that the team needs to do is come to India and try and understand whether the need that the prototype is built upon in Switzerland, is that the same need in India? And if it is, then how is it being addressed over here? And how is it different from the way it is being addressed in Switzerland? And I think it's very important to understand that it's not only talking to clinicians and nurses and going and doing tours at the hospitals or these setups would give you all these answers, because people would say things that are different, but when they are experiencing it, it's very different. So don't just take what people say into account, but also spend some time shadowing doctors, shadowing clinicians. If it's a surgical product, then try and see a few surgeries. If it is an interventional product, try and see those interventions, and then for yourself interpret how this is being used, and very importantly, who decides the use of the product, how long does it take, whether it was effectively done, and then compare it with your prototype and your solution and see what is it that you're addressing and what is it that might be excessive or might have to be changed or redesigned. But in any case, once you go back to Switzerland, I think that you would have to have a version India of your same product that would probably have to be redesigned, re-engineered for this need, but then layer it so that your eventual prototype could be the next solution that you could take after producing it. But the steps would be: come to India, understand the problems for a couple of months, not only by talking to people but experiencing it, compare it with your existing solution, make the changes, and come back and then try and get a quick field trial and make Indian partners. I think it's very important to then have multidisciplinary partners, both from clinical domains, product development domains, and in engineering domains in India as a part of your advisory team, or in some way collaborated with you, so you can understand the ground realities, and it'll help you implement clinical trials and studies and regulatory approvals.
Yeah, I can just add three things actually will be different. One is actually the usability. The way in which things will be used here in your country versus it will be used in India, depending on the skill levels, all those things will be very, very important to understand. The next one is in terms of most of our country, the rural part of the country, do not have a well-regulated power supply. Okay, so many of our villages do not have a power yet, and if they have a power, electricity, they are not very, very stable. Okay, so your equipment should withstand if it is going to be having a active components. So that is another important parameter, will be different. Third one is our infrastructure, even transport infrastructure is not well developed. Let's say your product is used from a place like where we are, Bangalore, about 300-400 kilometers from here, and let's say it requires some service. Okay, now for you to send a person and to repair it or replace it, That's going to be very expensive. So remotely monitoring that and providing the services, that is another major difference between developed countries and the developing countries like India. So these are the three things I can immediately think of in terms of usability, in terms of the quality of the power what we have. The third one is in terms of the serviceability. So these are the areas you will immediately see, even there is a need there, these things will be different. It will be challenging.
Great. Thank you. To the audience, we invite questions from you. You will find a small questions panel in your GoToWebinar toolbox. You are free to ask us any sort of questions about what we have just covered, or specific to your idea or your prototype or your product or your service that is currently in Switzerland. And if you're looking at India as an intellectual collaborator or even as a market, you're free to ask us any questions. I know that Eva had particular questions. Eva, please feel free to ask us the question, although we've had certain discussions and Skype calls in the past, but right now we have the experts here, so if you'd like to get your question answered, please go ahead and type it. In the meantime, till we have the questions from the participants, I'd like to just mention that we recently had a case of a Swiss startup that wanted to first analyze if India is the right market. So that startup is at the verge of information communication technology and the practice management for medical practitioners. So they use cloud and assist these medical practitioners in managing their bills, the history of their patients, and this product is working really well in the German speaking part of Switzerland, in Germany, Austria and Switzerland, and they wanted to port the similar product into the Indian market, and they spent about a month. That's the way swissnex India helps Swiss startups. We invite them to validate the Indian market. They spend about 3 to 4 weeks here speaking to experts, speaking to potential customers, gathering feedback, stakeholders, important stakeholders, and towards the end trying to retrofit their business model towards the Indian market. And when they ended their validation, they realized that they had to completely change their business model. In Switzerland, they were looking at alternate medicine practitioners. But in India, after a lot of discussions with the experts and speaking to a few stakeholders, they realized that the target audience is not the similar as in Switzerland. They had to look at these allopathic medicine practitioners, and that too not at the bigger hospitals, because there they already probably have the system. What's missing, the unmet need, was these practitioners would require the similar sort of setup when they're not in their big hospital, so maybe at their private practice or so. I was just trying to give an example of a Swiss startup that had to follow the exact recommendation that you just mentioned. I think we have a question from Eva. How big are governmental expenses in healthcare research in India? So Eva asks, how big are governmental expenses in healthcare research in India?
By governmental expenses, I think I'm assuming that these are the expenses borne for clinical trial or research, or I'm not quite sure what governmental expenses.
Eva, could you please elaborate a little bit? Yes.
So you mean clinical trials and research in India, what kind of expenses? So I think that's a valid question, and I think clinical trials and research in India is currently facing a whole complete makeover. And it is getting a little more rigorous and more expensive, but it also depends upon the device and the kind of interaction that it has with patients or clinicians, even if it's IT. So if it is something which is very simple and something that really is not invasive, I don't think clinical trials are very expensive. But if it's an implantable device, if it's a procedure and it requires strict ethical approvals, then it is quite expensive in India. If you want a number, then for some of the clinical trials that I've seen in large hospitals in India, roughly cost about, let's say, 10 to 15,000 US dollars as an average ballpark figure for some of the clinical trial studies, which last for 6 months to 9 months in their typically randomized controlled trials.
And are there grants for foreign nationals to carry out these clinical researches?
No, they would most likely want an Indian partner who would be an internal part of the hospital system, who could have privileges to apply to an ethical board. Currently, there are new guidelines. There is a clinical trial registry of India, which needs to register your clinical study with an ethical approval. And then there are protocols, and sometimes the Drug Controller General of India needs to be notified. And many times the Drug Controller General of India might also need to give his permission to do such a trial. That is usually in case of invasive devices or those which interact with the body significantly. And then there's very strict and rigorous implementation of consenting that is now starting. I think video consenting is a new thing that's going to start in India for patients. So with all that, it adds costs and increases the time. And
for example, for a non-invasive, for example, if it was the infrared way of looking at veins.
Yeah, so the infrared perceivably is a non-invasive device, but it claims that at an emergency situation, it would quickly help the clinician access IV. So maybe as a class of the device, it might be easy to get a CE or an FDA in terms of regulatory pathway, but when you want to do a clinical trial, it is quite a crucial and critical clinical trial because it is dealing with life-threatening situations.
Sure.
So I think the ethical board and the clinical trials registry would look into the design of the study and make sure that it is safe and it can be used. So that would be the only challenge. But with the number of cases that come in India and it's an external device, the clinical trial wouldn't be that expensive or long.
And are there potential clinical trial partners in India?
Yes, so there are a lot of popular CRO, I think clinical regulatory organizations, clinical research organizations that are available in India, and they have vast experience in doing clinical trials. They have access to hospitals. And they know the entire process of how to get registrations done and notifications done, and you can outsource that entire thing for about the same amount of price or maybe a little larger because of the service that they are providing, and you can outsource it entirely to them, right from study design, forming the protocols, and also getting the approvals and implementations, with getting Indian doctors being principal investigators and those things.
So in all of these costs that you mentioned, the part of governmental expenses, is it large or is it smaller? For example, getting the approvals and making the applications.
No, the governmental expenses in that sense is not large.
It's in getting the partners on board and making the travel, getting access to the hospital.
Yes, travel, stay, resources, logistics, salaries, and those kind of indirect costs are usually high. And if you're outsourcing it to a CRO, then they charge heavily for the service.
Or if you just consult them, ask them the process.
Yeah, there are CROs, they can provide consulting at various stages.
Sure.
Yeah. They can do only for the design.
Okay.
If you have the design, they can run it.
Okay.
So they can do whatever they want.
Okay. So does that answer your question, Eva? Yep, great.
Okay.
And if you have any more questions, please feel free to ask. We're here for another 10 minutes. And I just also wanted to bring to your attention that Swiss startups can continue to ask us the questions, and we'll be happy to pass on the questions to our Medtech experts in India who are in Excel. They also produced the report last year on the Indian Medtech scenario for Swiss startups, covering the opportunities, the things to be careful about for Swiss startups. And you can continue to ask us the questions. We will be happy to provide an answer on a continued basis. We are just entering the last leg of the webinar, and I would like to ask each one of you, we've covered a lot of things, but one reason, if you can point out, that a Swiss startup should look at India right now or in the coming, because it's evolving, right? And one reason, if you can point out from your personal experience or from the forecasts that you've made.
Very, very, very simple. As a citizen of India, I can tell you, we need your technology for our people here. We have a lot of problems, and I'm sure if you can modify some of the IP what you have, you can bring in solutions which are affordable. So you have the technology. All you need to do is how to marry that for our requirement. I think that's from the citizen perspective. Purely from business perspective, there are huge opportunity. Okay, and in the last 10 years, our people started putting a lot of emphasis on health, because when you become wealthy, that's the time you talk about being healthy. Because when you don't have money and you're frustrated and you start thinking why I should really live, but when you start becoming wealthy, you start thinking about healthy, and there's a huge amount of opportunity. And government is interested providing the right level of incentives for healthcare, and there's a lot of incentives for private companies to set up a delivery center and also development center. But there could be other nuances in terms of holding patent and other things. I'm not going to the legal aspects of it, but there are huge opportunities. So we need you, and I'm sure you will get a lot of benefits.
Well, I think my one reason is that there are a whole lot of diverse and very specific clinical problems in our country. So that is one of the big reasons to come. A is that there are so many of these problems that are hard to understand and difficult to solve, and if solved, basically make a very groundbreaking solution and an opportunity to help a large population from their problems, and also to create a great business opportunity. And I think it's also unique learning. I think for a startup company to understand a problem from a different cultural perspective and then inventing it and understanding it really gets you to think out of the box at many times, face situations that you would never expected, and learn those makes you a much better entrepreneur and a person at the end of the day. So,
Brilliant. Thank you very much. One last question that we have constantly been asked by a few medtech startups during Skype calls or email exchanges, because the way swissnex India tries to help Swiss startups is we tell them, if you have any questions, talk to us.
Sure.
We're here to assist you. We've got the network, we've got the experts on board. And then the next step is, if they are looking at India already, they are welcome to validate the market. And if they've validated it, they're welcome again to our infrastructure, which is shown in this picture, to enter the Indian market. And we can support them for up to 3 months. And never cut the cord really, but yes, 3 months is the time where we continuously are with them. The question that I'm talking about is, when they look at medical technology or look at even the educational part of medical sciences, which is obviously very different, but you also mentioned the All India Medical College Institute. So what would be your recommendation to Swiss startups in terms of which place to land in? Yeah. Obviously, swissnex India is based in Bangalore, where we can provide a soft landing platform. InExcel is based in Bangalore. Yeah. Our external experts for Swiss startups. But honestly, what would be your recommendation? There's also an option of Pune, where a lot of medical technology, not medical technology, but a lot of Swiss startups Swiss companies and startups that are looking at Pune as a potential destination, or a collaboration partner. So
I think I would be biased to say that Bangalore would be a good landing spot, but in terms of medical technologies, I think the profile that you would want is to land with a strong collaboration with a tertiary medical hospital or college, and then web into its clinical outreach centers and look through the tiers of the sub-center, primary healthcare center, community healthcare center, general hospital, district hospital, tertiary hospital pathway, and then look at a government tertiary hospital, and then cover corporate and nursing hospitals, but have your satellite focus at a tertiary medical college hospital, primarily because they are teaching institutes, so they are open to external people coming and they spend time talking and explaining. Secondly, they could be a very good clinical trials partner. They will have an ethical review board in place. And thirdly is that they are a referral center, so you get most of the patients coming there. And then when you work backwards into all the other peripheries, you can spend a few days in all these places to get an overall picture. But I don't think just one institute would suffice. And geographically, I think when you map into the peripheries, I think it makes good sense to at least visit Mumbai and Delhi, because they have certain cultural differences. Delhi is very well equipped, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of money goes into Medtech there. The system of working is slightly different. And with Mumbai, the approach to patients and the attitudes and the caseloads, especially in surgical domains, is very specific. And then Bangalore essentially covers, and the peripheries of Bangalore also covers a good model centers that can be generalized over the country.
Great. What would be your recommendation, Vijay?
Yeah, I think Bangalore will be the better option, because there are some regional differences within India compared to the other parts of the country. South is slightly matured in terms of the healthcare delivery. So if you want, because we don't want you to come to the real rural place, so you can be somewhere in between. So to that extent, I prefer that Bangalore could be, plus swissnex is here, so you will get that emotional support, and you will get enough problem validation in the south. That's just good enough. That's what I suggest.
Great. Thank you for answering this question. To the audience, we are towards the end of this webinar already. Time flies quick. You can still email us your questions at innovation@swissnexindia.org. The link is not clickable, so you can note it down if you'd like, or all the emails for these webinars are sent from innovation@swissnexindia.org. Thank you to both our experts, Mr. Jagdish, Dr. Jagdish, Mr. Vijay. Thank you to the audience for joining us. My name is Prateek. I run the startup services at Swissnex India. Thank you for your time once again.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.